Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell. Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Representative Mike Waltz, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Hey, Mike, man, I appreciate you coming on the show. It's always cool to have you on. You have been a busy dude because of the organization you work in, and your schedule gets chaotic. So, I schedule these things, and folks are like, "Hey, what happened?" And I'm like, "Congress happens all the time."
Yeah. Well, sorry about that. I blame Pelosi.
But, it's the building you work in. You have high priority things pop up all the time. So, recently, I wanted to make sure we included this. Recently, there's a picture of you standing next to a statue of Mary McLeod Bethune. Can you tell us a little bit about what she means to Florida and American history?
Yeah, she's really an incredible woman. She, an African-American woman in 1901, I believe, started a school to teach the children of many of the black families that were working on the railroad that ended up being the Flagler Railroad that really is what allowed Florida to eventually, for people to come into the state all the way from the north part of the state all the way down to Miami. And she started with literally a few dollars and a few students. Eventually, that became Bethune-Cookman University. It's an HBCU, and she was just a real leader in the education realm, in the civil rights realm. She rose from starting that school to being on FDR's cabinet, and eventually as a founding kind of plank holder and charter author for the United Nations. So she's just an incredible story of how this nation, by any means, the Ku Klux Klan walked through her school at one point, and she stood them and stared them down by herself after telling her students and faculty members to hide. But that we're not a perfect nation, but we are always improving, and I think she is a great case in point. And the culmination of that might be a little more than you wanted, but every state has two statues that represent the state in the Capitol building. Currently, Florida's is the man who invented air conditioning, also very important to living in that state, and a Confederate general. And the state legislature a few years ago voted to replace the general with Mary McLeod Bethune.
I love it. I love it. This is a remarkable place. I mean, I don't know how many countries in her time where Mary could have had such a rise and such a career, but right. I'm damn proud that it was. I mean, there might be other places, but I'm damn proud that it was us.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And then and just what 2 generations later, after her death, she died in the 1950s. We have a black president of the United States, and that's not to say we don't still have a long way to go as a country, but we've come pretty far. And that's, I'll be really proud to see her statue in the Capitol, hopefully in the next few months. And interestingly, it was carved, I guess, sorry for the sculptors out there if I'm saying it the wrong way. It was sculpted also by an immigrant, by a Hispanic woman. And the piece of marble was the last piece of marble to come out of the quarry that Michelangelo used for his famous sculpture, David. So just really kind of a neat historical thing all around.
Yeah, it really is. That's super cool. I recently read a book about the 10th Cav during the Indian Wars, and you see people, like these guys, for lack of a better term, these guys were special operators back then. They'd run around the border, sleeping if they had a tent, horses. They're climbing up and down things where people would be in awe of their horsemanship. And this was these are black troops. Maybe they had white guys with them. Maybe they had white officers, but these are black dudes who are out there being as hard as you can be, chasing people that don't want to get caught, that are killing people. And it's just remarkable to see the success. Now, it took a long time because it turns out Indian wars take a long time to deal with, but
Sure.
we often forget just how important, we've had this multi-ethnic thing going on, and even down in that area. And I don't want to go on too long about this, but there was a Chinese dude that started a grocery store, and that legacy lasted, almost 100 years. The family still owns the store. The store is kind of obsolete because it's from a different time, but what's an Asian dude? What's a Chinese dude doing down in southeastern, India, Indian-ridden Arizona, surviving if we're such a hateful place?
Right. Yeah. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, again, we're not perfect, but there will be many that want you to believe that the country is inherently misogynist, racist, colonialist, and bad. But you know what? If that's the case, why did we have Afghans so desperate to come here? They were willing to cling to the side of a jet, as it was taking off. Why do we have tens of thousands of people transiting, the Panamanian jungles, which are incredibly treacherous and dangerous, to come here? So, as Winston Churchill famously said, American democracy is the worst system of government in the world, except all the other. That we certainly have our flaws, but I still think we're the most exceptional nation on earth. And that's why the door keeps swinging one way of people wanting to come from all over the world.
You brought up Afghanistan. That was originally the reason I wanted to reach out to you. Look, we've both served. We understand what's happened. When the Secretary of Defense has to stand up in front of a crowd and say, I don't know how many Americans are there and I can't protect them, I need some heads. I mean, this whole thing continues on to this day. I mean, I know it's not in the news anymore, but how do we hold people accountable? And look, I know that we can kind of walk the thing around like, well, I was General Austin, I did my job, but look, we've seen the same players screw this up. Iraq, the Arab Spring, now Afghanistan. How many passes do we get before someone has to be accountable, right? Or am I wrong?
What's so frustrating is you would have thought this same crowd and the same foreign policy team that was around Obama is around Biden now.
Right.
All the number 2s and 3s are now the number 1s and 2s, and including Austin, who was the commander of CENTCOM during the withdrawal from Iraq and the rise of ISIS. You would have thought they would have learned from the Iraq example. We went down to 0 in Iraq. And that was celebrated on both sides of the aisle, by the way. I mean, by the libertarians on one side and progressives and others for different reasons. But, this notion that we can just stick our head in the sand, pull our troops out, and pray it'll all be okay, I think is really irresponsible. Well, a couple of years later, you have an ISIS caliphate the size of Indiana. You have Americans and others, Japanese, Jordanians, in orange jumpsuits being beheaded on international television. You have attacks all over Europe. You have inspired attacks here in the United States. And then we have to send how many tens of thousands of soldiers back into Iraq and Syria to deal with it. And we're going down that same road right now in Afghanistan. Yeah. We are blind on the ground. Yes, we have long-range drones, but they burn up most of their fuel getting there and back. And we have nothing on the ground to then deal with it. So we have no bases in the region. We have no local allies. And now the Taliban are armed to the teeth with our own equipment. So if we do have to go back, now the Pentagon is saying 6 to 12 months, ISIS will be capable of striking the United States. I think it's going to be far, far worse. I mean, Pete, imagine when we had to go back into Iraq and Syria, if we had to do so without the Kurds, right? If the Kurds had been wiped out by ISIS. Well, the equivalent of the Kurds over in Afghanistan and the Panjshir are getting wiped out. So it's going to be a hot mess. And I don't want to wait until we have another San Bernardino, another Pulse nightclub, or God forbid, another 9/11 before taking action.
Yeah, it's frustrating. There are so many things I wanted to add to that. But one of the things for sure I want to bring up was the last time Joe Biden went to go see a head of state to try to improve a deal was the deal that Condoleezza Rice left. He couldn't get, and I know people that were in the room, that were in the room when they were there, and Joe Biden couldn't manage to get a sofa in place. So here's a guy who must think it's okay to be like, well, that's the deal we got.
Yep.
And then this just is so frustrating. Mike, we can put a division-sized element in DC indefinitely. I mean, I don't even know what to say about that. How?
Well, not to mention the fact that, on the one hand, they're briefing, well, we can go anywhere around the world and strike any terrorist we want, but yet we can't manage to go anywhere around the world and save any American that we want, including the ones that we left behind. So many veterans groups have had to step up from a grassroots perspective to do what the State Department and the Defense Department should be doing. And they're still at it. And many of these guys, most of them guys, a lot of gals too, have quit their jobs. They've exhausted their personal savings. They're out, asking donors to help buy airplanes and flights. They're up night and day keeping these people alive in various safe houses. That is, while it's heroic and it's commendable, and I love these groups for them, like Pineapple and Allied Airlift and others, they're doing the job the government should be doing. And for the State Department to essentially kind of shrug its shoulders, to me is really unforgivable. We just got an 80-year-old couple, American couple, diabetic, across the border. One of these groups have had 9 flights of people pulled out at this point. We can't get a straight answer on exactly how many Americans are left. And for the Secretary of State and Defense to say, well, there's a body of people that didn't want to leave. Show me these people. The reality is they were told they can't bring their family members and they didn't want to leave them behind. But you don't then to get to categorize them as not wanting to leave, and therefore you're not going to help. So it's really been frustrating is even in the right word. It has really been probably the most disappointed I've ever been in my own government in 30 years of doing this.
Yeah, same. I mean, I think this is the biggest presidential disaster we've had in my lifetime. I mean, Watergate is adorable next to this. Like it's like, are you kidding me? You left Americans. Again, the Secretary of Defense had to say, I don't know how many Americans are there, and I can't protect them. We're the United States of America. You can throw an effing in front of that America if you want.
And we're letting the terrorists dictate the terms.
Right.
We were afraid to stay past August 31, or else we didn't know what they would do. Well, how about flip the tables and tell them, or else you don't know what we will do. Right. We will start putting bombs on foreheads unless you keep the ground lines and airlines open to get all our people out, and we'll tell you when that job is done. But we have an administration. I've seen it for a while now because I know the team that's around him: Blinken, Sullivan, Feiner, Austin, Avril Haines, that truly believes. And Obama said it in his second inaugural speech. If you go back and look at it, that we extend a hand to the world, not a fist. Well, you know what? Our adversaries only understand strength, and they see weakness as something to take advantage of. And right now they smell weakness in the White House. And to all of our allies around the world, they're really shaking their head, wondering if America is really going to be there. I mean, you can imagine what they're thinking in Taiwan or Ukraine or places like Estonia and Latvia.
Or even France.
Or if you're a Cuban dissident who braved, life and limb, not just your entire family, to stand up for freedom, and you got a press statement and a shoulder shrug from the White House. It's incredible.
Yeah, we also turncoat in all of our allies, by popping out on Afghanistan. They shouldn't be caught unawares. It makes us a horrible partner. It's worse than an embarrassment, like you said. So, has anybody be held accountable? I mean, are you guys gonna?
Well, I mean, to your point that I had an ambassador who I've known for a while from an allied country, send me a note and say, who the heck would sign up for Team USA right now? Right. And that the message this is what people, I think, even gets lost on the Pentagon. They're looking at how long it's going to take ISIS and Al Qaeda to have training camps, to train up terrorists, to be able to infiltrate, plot and plan and infiltrate them here. They're missing the inspiration piece, right? All of those attacks that happened when we had ISIS in Iraq and Syria were inspired. And the message, that I got from another ambassador was the message across the region is jihad is won, democracy is lost, the world's most capable military was defeated and turned and ran. And that will inspire attacks here well before they can infiltrate people here. So, how do we hold people accountable? That's something I keep asking my Democrat colleagues. I'll keep demanding it. We're working on a commission now where, they want it to look at 20 years. We want it to look at just the last 2 years and the actual withdrawal. I think you could fill this office I'm in with think tank reports on the mistakes that we've made over the last 20 years. I don't think we need to relitigate those. I wrote a whole book on it from when I served in the Bush administration.
Right.
But we haven't looked at the withdrawal decision. Why did we pull all of our military out before we got our civilians out? When we had to reintroduce our military in the NEO mission, why didn't we take Bagram? Why did we? There's reporting now that the suicide bomber that killed our 13 Marines was actually released from the prison in Bagram just a few days prior. The botched drone strike, like all of that needs real oversight and examination. And I think you're absolutely right, accountability. So we're trying to negotiate the terms of what that looks like right now, like literally as we speak.
Well, yeah, please keep doing that. Because one thing I'm telling you as a voter that I'm sick of seeing are self-righteous Congress people barking at somebody, and then that's it. That's the end of it. Like, hey, great. And this is both sides now. I mean, I'm not picking on anybody, but Leslie Graham comes to mind. He's barking at some CEO, and then nothing comes of it, right? Like, it's just on the voter side of it, it's frustrating to see something that there must be culpability, but we're just not getting it. And so I appreciate you guys working.
From the military time, I'm sure you've seen people, I've relieved people for a fraction of what just went down in this debacle. And the fact that there weren't resignations just out of some sense of duty and honor, to me is kind of mind blowing. But everybody wants to do this and point to the other guy. DOD's pointing to state and vice versa, and they're all pointing to the intelligence failure. And at the end of the day, the president said it. The buck stopped with him. Many of these were his decisions. I think he came in with biases from when he was vice president and the surge that Obama sent in. And despite everything that was presented to him, he very stubbornly stuck to this decision despite the conditions on the ground. And it's going to be something this country really regrets. And I fear that we're going to pay for it in blood of citizens with the next terrorist attack right here in the United States.
Followed on by another small scale war where we put people right back up. Yeah, no, I mean that is the expected outcome of this whole thing, and it's just infuriating. On
that depressing note, yeah.
But okay, so you guys are working on that. Can we get some good news before I lose you? Because I got 10 more minutes with you. What's going on that makes you excited? Tell me something that's truly bipartisan that you're excited about.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is I'm a staunch believer in the goodness of service and national service. And there's a bipartisan group of veterans in a caucus. That's where kind of a group of members around an issue called For Country. And we are working on reintroducing national service into American society. Now, that's not mandating a draft. The Israelis do that, but their population's 8 million, ours 320 million, totally different scale. And I don't mean just in uniform. You can be in inner city tutoring, you can be in rural medicine, you can be in national parks. But how do we get young people back into a mindset of leadership, teamwork, followership, serving a cause that's bigger than them, and doing it with people of different race, religion, socioeconomic backgrounds, right? And truly understanding their other fellow Americans, and then going back into society. So we have all this talk about free this and free that and debt relief and free college. Well, I think the people paying for that, their fellow taxpayers, deserve some service for that. Our society deserves some service for that. And they will then be better citizens for that, right? And I think that's really missing from our national dialogue. And if you look at the greatest generation, black, white, and brown, they all came together and achieved amazing things. And they had a better understanding of each other for it when they went back into American society. And so that is one thing that we're working on. Look, in Florida, the environment is not a partisan issue. Clean water, clean beaches, everything from the manatees to our springs is not just something that's nice to have. It's a must-have for our economy, for tourism, for really our way of life. And that's something I'm working hard on with a number of Democrats as well. How do we strike that balance between development, which of course we encourage people to come and live and enjoy the great state, at the same time keep it beautiful. So that kind of stuff doesn't make the news, right? Because the news loves drama, and they love it when we're yelling at each other about our disagreements rather than coming together and moving the ball forward. But we are. And I think I don't know if I told you in a previous time we were together. Just one other quick story. For the 75th anniversary of D-Day, I came together with a Democrat ranger from Colorado, and we jumped over St. Mary Glees out of the original C-47. So we're doing that kind of stuff too, because America needs to see us coming together for a larger cause than just our political parties. You
guys didn't static line jump though, did you? Did you guys?
Oh, we did, man. Out of original, out of original, the plane that led the invasion fleet in 1944, and we did it with a 92-year-old paratrooper that hadn't jumped since 1944. So that was, and he was hooting and hollering all the way down to the ground. I mean, he said a hell of a lot better than being shot at by the Germans, right? And the reaction of the French people in Normandy, "We love you, America. Thank you for our freedom. Thank you for liberating us," was just really moving. You would have thought D-Day had happened last week, not 75 years ago. It was really incredible.
I did Nijmegen in the mid-90s, and when you go walking through that whole region, oh my God, and the hatred still for the Germans. I mean, they haven't forgotten either way, and it's remarkable. One note on your service thing, I love that idea. People need to be young, they need to be in service. There are also, get this, 5,000 doctors that graduate from medical school every year and can't find a residency.
Wow.
If we could put those guys to work in some way, that's a game changer in terms
that's totally a game changer. And just one other piece on the bipartisan side is really investing us back into STEM and research, and kind of getting, back to those basics. We're due to be 1 million jobs short in the STEM fields over the next decade. China is now graduating twice the number of PhDs than we are. And they're investing. We just saw it with the hypersonic missile launch. They're investing heavily in those critical technologies, whether they're advanced materials or AI or nanorobotics, on top of stealing ours, left, right, and center through cyber, through our universities, or they just buy up the companies, ironically, many of which are bankrupt because of COVID. So we have to invest heavily, but then also protect those investments, because we can't pour billions into our own research and development and then have it flow right out the back door to Beijing, right over into their military. So I'm working hard on a lot of China provisions. We need to wake up as a country. I could solve our supply chain tomorrow if everybody who picked something up and said made in China put it down and went and bought something that said made in America. We wouldn't have ships backed up off the shore in California. So there's a lot going on here, man. And a lot of it is moving the ball forward. Some of it's scary. It's not moving fast enough. And then sometimes I don't want bad policy to happen. So sometimes I don't mind things not happening in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I get that. One of the things that I think about is our ever expanding. I'm not a fan of executive orders, Mike. It just drives me a little bit crazy that we don't elect a king. It's like you have to build a consensus with the people that have the checkbook, like you. But what are we going to do to check that up? Because it's irresponsible and insane to have this left-right careening when the executive changes and just line item eliminating things. We can't run a country like that.
Yeah, man, that's a complicated answer because I think that's really rooted in partisanship.
Yeah.
Why we have more and more members that are going to the polls, to either extreme, and therefore it creates gridlock, and therefore an elected president gets frustrated and starts issuing those executive orders, right? Which you're right is in a real gray area constitutionally, many of them, and because we have dysfunction here. I'm convinced that part of the dysfunction is also tied to the record low number of veterans that we have in Congress. We've gone from 75% of the House and the Senate were vets in the 1970s. Today, it's at 16%. And that's on both sides of the aisle. And why does that matter? Well, it's not necessarily we agree on all the issues. It's more that if we were willing to die for the flag, we will come together and find common ground and move the ball forward. Because in the foxhole, nobody cared about race, religion, socioeconomic background. They certainly don't care about political party. So that ethos, I think, was there in previous Congresses and generations and is really missing now. And then you add on to that, what the news cycle rewards, in terms of clicks and ratings. And, it's kind of like, why do people slow down and watch a car wreck? So that drives members to be confrontational rather than compromise. And I think we have a culmination of a number of things that lead presidents to just get frustrated and start issuing those. But you're right, it creates this pendulum careening of policy that's not good for the country.
Yeah, it sure isn't. And you're right about that. I'm proud to see Marjorie Eastman and your buddy Ryan Zinke all running, and I'll take people from any side of the aisle running if they have some veteran, background, because we all want to push on the mission, and we're trying to make this a better place. So please, if you're a veteran, be of service in some way, and running for Congress would be a good way.
That's right. Well, and it doesn't have to be just Congress. It can be city council, county commission, state rep. I mean, the states are really where the laws are passed that affect your everyday lives. That's why living in Florida is so much different than, say, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And so we need veterans at all levels. And right now we're at a record low. And I tell them all the time, you're not done just because you went overseas. You don't get to go drink a beer at the VFW the rest of your time until war stories. Keep serving, keep stepping up. The country needs you.
All right. Well, there we go. Hey, listen, I'll let that be the end of it. I appreciate you. Can't wait to have you back on again. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Anything in closing?
No, Pete, look, I think my mission right now is I am not going to have, my children or grandchildren growing up in a country, defined by socialism, or in a world defined by the Chinese version of communism. And that may sound extreme, but I think that is, we are but a few key decisions and pieces of legislation from the United States bankrupting itself. And when that happens, that's when China steps into the void. Their theory of victory is not World War III. It's the United States stepping aside because we can't afford to compete. So till next time, that's what I'll be working on.
All right. Talk to you soon.